This is episode 6 in a series chronicling my adventures in building a DIY CNC router. If you've missed the previous episodes, I encourage you to go back and check them out. The major construction is done and it's time to make things look pretty. I'm going for a durable protective finish from rattle cans with no runs, drips, or errors. Let's give it a try. It's time to paint. A necessary evil that I find rewarding yet painful at the same time. I have to say this is one area where the wiki really shines. If you've never painted metal before, I highly recommend you give it a read-through. The two most important takeaways are removing the mill scale from the steel and proper cleaning before applying the primer. About 9 years ago, I built a stand for my South Bend lathe using similar materials. The paint has held up perfectly on that project, so I'll be following those same procedures with this build. A large part of the wiki is devoted to the process of pickling the steel in order to clean it and help remove the mill scale. It seems to also be discussed quite a bit in the Discord chat. It's certainly an interesting process, but given my past experience with the lathe bench, I don't feel that it's necessary. My mill scale removal tool of choice is an orbital palm sander with 80 grit paper. Not only does it remove the mill scale quickly, it leaves a nice scuffed surface for the primer to bite into. For primer, I'm using the Rust-Oleum self-etching automotive primer. The top coat will be Rust-Oleum gloss enamel in a wonderful Regal red. As usual, I'll leave links to all the tools and products I've used in the video in the description below. I decided to start with the 3 roller blocks to test the process out and to see how things went. The 80 grit paper easily chews through the mill scale. Unfortunately, the vac connection for my sander is broken, so all that mill scale dust is just left flying around the room. Proper PPE was employed. I confess I was not super meticulous about getting every bit of stuck on mill scale. Again, drawing from past experience, if the scale isn't able to be removed by 80 grit paper and the steel is properly painted, it'll last at least 9 years. With all these blocks free of mill scale, it was time to clean the steel. I find acetone works best. It's a very powerful solvent and removes all traces of dirt, dust, and oil. Proper PPE is a must. My mask has both particle filtration as well as vapor mitigation. A simple N95 mask is not enough here. Also, make sure to have good ventilation for this entire painting process. I like using these shop towels instead of paper towels. They're stronger and don't disintegrate from the acetone like regular paper towels do. I keep them on auto order, so I always have a supply. I also highly encourage you to wear gloves for 2 reasons. Getting acetone on your skin is kinda cool, well, actually literally cold, and feels really interesting, but it'll dry out your skin terribly. Also, after going to all the effort to clean and degrease the steel, you don't want to put all that back again from the natural oils on your skin. You're a surgeon here, glove up. Keep cleaning each piece until the towel no longer becomes dirty. It's amazing how many times it needs to be wiped down before it's really clean. Doing this properly now means your paint won't lift and peel later. I do a final wipe down with a microfiber cloth and acetone just to remove any towel fibers or dust and prepare to shoot some primer. Because these parts are small, I'm using my airbrush paint booth to utilize the turntable as well as knock down some overspray. Very important, remove anything from the room you don't want covered in paint overspray. I'm doing this in my garage, so the first thing I did was back out the cars. You can also enclose an area in plastic to create a small paint booth, but be very aware that toxic fumes can build up very quickly in an enclosed space. If you can do this outside, I highly recommend it for your health and safety. Unfortunately for me, this was happening in the middle of January, so outside was not an option, mainly because it's too cold to properly paint. Each roller, in fact, every piece I paint from here on out gets the same procedure. I apply a light coat, attempting for about 80% coverage, then let the paint flash off for 2 minutes. I then repeat that 2 more times for a total of 3 coats. I want each coat to be just enough to cover but not enough to run. Don't worry, you'll have to do this enough times that you'll get the feel of it pretty quickly. For the rest of the video, I'll be merciful and save you the thrill of watching me apply all the coats. Amazingly, every coat looks the same as the last. The chunk of steel I have for the gantry was a bit of an outlier. It didn't really have mill scale on it, or if it did, it was very thin. The 80 grit prep seemed more about scratching up the surface than removing mill scale. Anything that speeds up the painting process is fine with me. As with the rollers, I was very meticulous about cleaning and degreasing the steel, using as many towels as it takes to remove any grime until the towel comes off clean. I used the exact same process to paint the gantry as was used on the rollers, 3 light coats of primer with a 2-minute flash off between each coat. I really missed the turntable here, as getting fully around the piece was a bit of a challenge. Perhaps I could have built one or planned things out a little bit better, but I really just wanted to get this painting done. Hey, I wanted to make sure you got your dose of drilling and tapping. Before prepping the Y-axis tubes for paint, I drilled the final holes for the cable chain mounts as well as the end stop brackets, which were marked out in the last episode. These were drilled to 5mm and tapped for M6. If you recall, in episode 3, I had to do some major reconstructive surgery on the Y-axis tubes because of, we'll call it, misunderstanding. For a refresher, check out episode 3, linked here. So that hatchet job left the tubes with some very nasty scars that just would not look good when painted over. If I've learned one thing from all the auto restoration shows that have been produced in the last decade, Bondo fixes everything. Well, at least I'm going to use it here. I prepped the area in the same way I would for painting. I scuffed the area with the 80 grit paper to give the Bondo something to bite into and degreased the area thoroughly with acetone. I mixed up some sweet-smelling Bondo according to the instruction on the can and applied it to the problem areas, making sure to work the product into the weld gaps. I took care not to fill up the nearby tapped holes. After the Bondo's set up, I sanded it down with some 120 grit sandpaper to remove the excess and level out the problem spots. This stuff makes a huge mess when sanding, so I kept the shop vac close. Using a machinist square for a straight edge, I checked for light gaps across the weld. When I was satisfied with the results, I moved on. More of the same now. The Y-axis tubes are prepped with 80 grit paper to remove mill scale and scuff the surface. Then a meticulous acetone wipe down to remove dust and oil. I was careful not to be too aggressive with the acetone over the bondoed area. Same as before, the tubes got 3 light coats of etching primer with a 2-minute flash off between each coat. When researching this build, I noticed a lot of folks would put a piece of 1x scrap wood in the tubes and lay them horizontal between a couple of sawhorses for painting. This is, in fact, how the wiki suggests it be done. I decided to go with a vertical approach because then I wouldn't have to turn them like a shish kebab on a grill. Since I'm doing 3 coats, I would have to turn each piece 3 times while trying not to drop them or bump them into each other while the paint is wet. I had seen a video on YouTube where someone raved about a tool by Craftsman called a restorer, and specifically how great it was for removing mill scale from steel, so I decided to try it out. My plan was to do a full tool tryout video on the product, but honestly, I was more impressed with the job done by the palm sander, so I don't think I'll waste the time making a separate video. The unit comes with a 60 grit belt, which I was concerned might be a bit too aggressive, but since that's all that I had, I installed it and gave it a go. To be fair, the restorer did remove mill scale and scuffed the surface quite prominently. Also, it was very fast in doing it. The issue I have with it, at least for this application, is that it won't form to the steel at all. If there are any sort of crown or valley on the surface, the tool just skips over it. I think on a painted wood surface where some of the base material can be removed by the tool, it'd be quite effective. But on steel, it just left all the mill scale in the low spots behind. Now, I don't think the restorer is a bad tool by any means, but I don't think this is the best application for it. And to be fair, this isn't really the usage case it was designed for. So I went back to the palm sander with 80 grit paper and cleaned up the deeper scratches and low-lying mill scale left behind from the restorer. The tubes were then thoroughly wiped down with acetone and set up to prime. As with all that came before, the tubes were shot with 3 light coats of self-etching primer, letting the paint flash off for 2 minutes between each coat. I waited about 40 minutes for the primer to set up and moved on to top coating so I could take advantage of the chemical cross-linking between the primer and top coat to get a strong, durable finish. Because I primed these first, I started with the 3 roller tubes. Same process as primer, I shot 3 light coats with 2-minute flash-off periods between each coat. Since the cross-linking process only happens when the base or primer coat is still uncured, I was under a bit of a time crunch. To take advantage of cross-linking, the top coat needs to be in place within 60 minutes of the last primer coat. If this is missed, you need to wait 48 hours, then sand the primer coat to aid adhesion. I really wanted to finish painting in one day, so I marched ahead briskly. With the long tubes, once the final coat was applied, I used a couple of fasteners in the threaded holes to use as handles to move the tubes to a drying location in the back of the shop. With everything painted and set aside in a safe location to cure, I desperately needed to vent the garage and let some of that cool January air in. With the painting complete and this video released, I'm now caught up on the backlog of progress I've made on this project. So it'll be back out to the shop to document the next steps. I think 5 months is enough time for the paint to cure. I want to thank you for following along with this series and for the interest that you've shown. I love the comments you send in, and it's really cool to hear from those of you that are doing the project as well. Next steps will be reassembling the machine, figuring out that sticky gantry motion situation, and working on some electronics. Oh yeah, the Z-axis, that's a lot of stuff. Well, when I get each of those parts done, you'll be the first to know. Until next time, I'm mainejason. Get out there and give it a try. Hey, so why am I wearing this hat anyway? It's like 90 degrees outside.
Continuity.
What?
We gotta keep continuity.
Who cares about continuity?
We can use this wood for real.
I don't think anybody watches to the end of these videos.